Hello and welcome to Jasper's Laboratory. Good evening. I come to you from the Netherlands and it's about 9 o'clock here, Central European Time. I want to talk to you about Dungeons. I want to talk to you about Dungeons and Dragons because this is specifically from one of my Dungeons and Dragons campaign. But the thing I want to do most of all is show you how you can prepare certain things. And I'm doing my kind of Dramour series, and this episode is dedicated to foreshadowing and escaping in general. Some of the things that I'm going to tell are very specific to this adventure, but I hope that I can kind of extrapolate stuff from this adventure to some general rules that you can use as a dungeon master. You don't have to. It's still City Adventures. The title is the same as the last one. That's I did that on purpose, and because we are starting in the city again, and we are starting when our party has just been taken prisoner by the guard after nearly murdering the child of what they think is the Master of Coins, which is their self-proclaimed enemy. They could also have just paid him 2,000 gold pieces, but they didn't do that. They infiltrated the party and then they got arrested, so to say. So a lot of stuff has happened. But before we dive into that, I just want to say that we have some socials. Twitch and YouTube are our most important ones where we do our stuff. So to say. And then we have Discord. Discord, our very own Discord, where you can possibly chat with us, share some thoughts. There are some games running there. Then we have the Instagram, we have the YouTube, the Facebook, and we even have a Reddit, but we don't use that very much. And we do sometimes use Twitter. So follow us everywhere. Next Monday there will be a new parallel projections where we will probably be playing Dust City Outlaws, and yesterday I was still talking about what I was going to do on Tuesday. Probably there will not be a Talking Void next Tuesday, and that's because I've got other work-related stuff that I have to do from my other job, and I had a conflict in agenda, so that's a pity. But you might mull things over, ask me some questions through the Discord, and I will probably incorporate that in our next show. I'm looking forward to this one. I don't think it will be that long, but it always runs longer than we expect. But I hope you get some ideas for your own game when you see this one. So let's go into the intro. So immediately to the other screen, escape and foreshadowing. That's kind of the things that I want to discuss. Why do I want to combine these? Well, as I've said before, I like my games complicated, so to say. I really like to give myself a challenge. And so, and the other thing is I have this party that I only play with once a month, so I want to make everything that's happening to them important in some way, not by just putting them through a hell of a lot of experiences, but putting subtle things into their game so that they later think, aha, that happened because of that, and that kind of stuff, which is fun as a player to experience as well. But it makes it kind of complicated for dungeon masters because you kind of have to run the long game. And I like the long game, so that is what I'm going to discuss this evening. So what can you use as a starter DM from what I'm going to say? Well, I always think that if you get a lot of information from somebody who is experienced, you might not absorb everything that the person is saying, but at least you can get triggered when you start doing stuff, and then you can possibly rewatch the episode again, or just from mind apply what I have to tell you. I'm not a professor in Dungeons and Dragons, nor am I in session preparations, but I think I have got some experience for the last 28 years that I did this. Just run with me. Ask me a question. You can also tell me I'm wrong about stuff, and that's okay too, because there's no one way to run this game. All my examples can be improved upon or detracted from or whatever. I really like to discuss this with you in chat. So if you have any remarks or something else to say, just do it, and I will answer the question to the best of my ability or learn something from it. As I was saying, my party got captured and is now in prison. And the thing about prisons is that they are strange things to run as a dungeon master, because the first thing I did was that hello, welcome to the stream. The first thing that I did was telling them that this guard came up to them, or this captain of the watch, and he was saying, we work for the bastard that got you arrested, and we are going to execute you tomorrow at dawn. So there's a kind of a timer happening if it ends, they die, so to say. But then, as a dungeon master, you always learn from other people, and I think Matthew Colville has a great example of this, where he's really disappointed at how he handled a certain imprisonment for his characters, and I kind of learned from that as well. But it is that you don't want to make them feel like there are no options left. And I think that in his example, one of the characters killed himself, which was totally unnecessary, because he had these plans with the other party, but they didn't know from each other, and so stuff happened. When I'm telling my characters that they are going to die in the morning, they of course get really desperate, and they are going to try stuff, and most of it doesn't work. The bars are magically protected. They don't have a key. They can't open the lock with a set of thieving tools. Most gear, by the way, has been taken from them, for example, and they are in chests in a room nearby. And I made this map that put them in the furthest jail cell from the door, so there was no way to just reach for the door or do stuff in that regard. So really the only ways they could communicate with anything is by the bird of the ranger, who he has a spectral falcon that can fly through walls, so that was a thing. Whenever a guard would come in, they could talk to that person. But their roles often fail when the stress is high, so that didn't work that well. The bird could fly out and could do stuff. But this time I had kind of a Deus Ex Machina effect in place, where Johanna, who I talked about before, was the helper of their main adversary, Ortmund. No, Horatio. Sorry, I sometimes mix up names because I reuse names in different combinations. Horatio, who is also Orison, who is the main bad, at least for this story arc, and possibly for all of it. Anyway, he sent her because he's constantly scrying on the party to see what they are doing, and he wants to have stuff from them in the future when they're powerful enough to get that stuff, and so he wants them to stay alive, especially because his son is in there, and he wants to kind of have his son in his corner, so to say. So he sends, the thing is, he sends in Johanna Zilverschijn, and she helps them escape. And she does that by getting the keys from the watch. She's a powerful clerk herself. You know that she's a clerk because she tells them that she takes care of the old wizard Horatio Wittegar, who's like in his 90s, and she's kind of nursing him, but doing it with magic as well. So they've seen her cast healing spells and stuff. It looks like she's a priestess of the good god, but she's actually not. I'm not going into details what kind of god she does worship, though. It doesn't really matter for this story. So she helps them with at least the start of an escape. She opens the jail cell. She leaves the complex through the guard station that's upstairs, and tells them where to go when they escape. So this sets in motion the first part of the escape, and this is why I have written some stuff down which I want to discuss this episode. The first thing is, why are things where they are? I'll get into that one later. The next one is, the next two things are how to run an escape skill challenge and how to run an escape elaborate dungeon. So the first part that I'm going to explain is a skill challenge, actually. It's how they escape from the guard post towards the home in the same city, and they do it by running very hard and using their environment to thwart the guards. And the other thing that I want the elaborate dungeon comes afterwards, and that's where the foreshadowing also takes part. Now, the other thing I want to discuss is how to punish your players and how to unite your players. Why do I want to discuss this? That's because not all of the characters are in the cells. There's one missing, and that's the one who shot the firebolt towards the son of the paladin that was, at least serves the master of coins and got them arrested in the first place. So the main subject is not there, and they should have picked up on this when this happened, because the guards certainly knew that he was there, but they understood from without the paladin, the Black Dragonborn paladin, even telling them that he was off limits, so to say. So he got taken to cells below the manor, and there he got tortured. We'll get into that later when we go into the punishment stuff. And then the other thing is how to unite your players, because some of the players during the things that I'm going to discuss had a lot of problems with how to keep the crew together and why they would even stay together, because some of them were just not that nice of a people. Why are things where they are? So I'm going to do two escapes. The first one is an escape that takes place in Dramur. I've shown you let me go to this one. I've shown you the picture of Dramur. This is it. They are on a guard post that's on the upper level, and they need to get to somewhere around here, I think. So there's this route that they have to take. Now, what is in their way? The obstacle is they have to get to a lower level, but I didn't even tell them that in a literal sense. And then they had to also get to a home that was near the wall, and so they had to cross through a couple of streets to get there. So that was the first challenge they had. And the only thing I needed to know is that they had to take a kind of a couple of corners. They were going down in some way, and they had to leave the guardhouse. So those were the main three things. So I started off. No. Okay, so that's the first challenge. The second one is that when they completed the first challenge, they were in the house of Johanna, and she had a kind of staircase going down, which led to a lower city, which led to a river, which led to the outside somewhere far from Dramur. And so that was quite a longer escape, and I ran that as a kind of dungeon, so to say. So these are two ways that an escape is part of your adventure. And one isn't better than the other, but one is very short, the other is very long. Because when you make a dungeon, I don't know if this is the case for everybody, but I think it took them 3 sessions to get out of the escape dungeon, which could be considered long, but it was also kind of necessary for the things that they experienced along the route. And that is the thing. Everything you do, you can make into an adventure, make it exciting by adding stuff that will be important for them. But let's get what I had to know. Why are things there? Is, as I told you, I had a kind of undercity prepared for this escape. And this undercity is there because a lot of years ago, many years ago, a sorcerer destroyed the city of Dramur by simply dropping a mountain on it. That's why it's so strangely leveled, the city. And then they started building a new city on top of that. So below the city, there's another city. Now, why is this? Why do I know that this city is even here? Because I need it for my story. It is where the big bad guy has his shelter, so to say, at least in part of this undercity. But it's also connected to a whole set of caverns that can help the players escape in this case. So it has a double function. It has the function of being connected to the outside in some way, and it has the function of the first. Okay. So the function of the city is that it is the end game, so to say, but it is also a piece of knowledge that can be planted in the minds of the players, so that when they later start thinking about where could this big bad guy be, well, we were saved by Johanna Silverschijn, who we now know is kind of in league with the big bad, and she, in her house, had an escape into this undercity that we never really explored. But we will not be triggering any of that part of the story this session, because they don't know that Johanna Silverschijn is kind of an agent of their enemy, so to say. They don't even know that their enemy is their enemy yet. So it's really, she really seems to be a helpful person who just wants to help her escape. But as you will see in the map that I have drawn for that part, there are branches that could have been taken during this escape, where they would have seen obviously very powerful, magically protected wards and stuff, and golems defending part of the city that they should certainly avoid at level 4 or 5. So that's why I know this is there. Then I also know that there's a front gate to the city, and there was an attack on the city at some point by undead, and so these undead are still kind of there. So there's this chasm in front of this gate, where there's a bridge that spans the chasm, which they have to cross and then cross back over again at a later point, because that chasm was created to trap the undead in. So I know that is there because of historical reasons, and the undead are still there. Then I know about an underground stream that's connected to this complex. Why is that underground stream there? Simply because there was a lot of smuggling in the early days in this city, and they they kind of had this route out of the city where they could escape on small boats, for example. Thanks for joining us, fellow Rings. How else is the party supposed to complete the speedrun without bum rushing the big bad evil guy? Yeah, they could have done that as well, although he wasn't there at the moment, so that's another thing. But a couple of his right and left hand men and women were there, so they could have at least discovered some stuff. They would also have seen a couple of symbols that would have directed them to some bigger plot, which they would not have connected to the big bad evil guy as well, but they would have connected it to their first adventure where they got a key with a pentagram on top of it as part of the front part of the key, not the back side, but the front part of the key. They would have seen this pentagram again, which is kind of distinct in how it's positioned and stuff. So that would have given them a hint that there are greater things afoot. That is why I know these three parts are there in the lower city. The lower city itself, the gate part, and the underground stream that leads out of the city and into the wilderness. So that's their main escape route. Johanna knows this as well because she knows the city really well, because she stays part of her time there, planning stuff for her boss. So that's the foreshadowing part of this campaign. We get into we are now going into a combination of the skill challenge and how to punish your players. Because I love to punish my players. And that is because one part of them did the skill challenge. The other part, the one person, was being tortured at the same time. I played this, I think, not synchronized. I think I even planned a mini session through the internet with the player who was being tortured to really get this bond between us, and that only he knew what happened and stuff. I did the kind of really nasty prison scene with him, where there were a couple of things happening. First off, why was I doing this? That's important, because otherwise you think, what a sadist, because I kind of was. There are a lot of things characters can do in Dungeons and Dragons that will never give them that lets them get away with stuff that would not happen in the normal world. And you sometimes notice that things almost go too far, because when this player was nearly killing the child, there was kind of a dissonance in the group as well, where they all felt, whoa, this is going too far. And even the player was scared because he didn't think that his firebolt would have such an impact on a child. And this is a rules thing as well. But up until then, they had felt kind of invincible, because even when they got punished by bad results for the die rolls or an escape from their dungeon master, I think they still were kind of thinking of, or part of them were still thinking of this as a kind of a dungeon run and maybe an MMORPG. Don't know for certain, but I got that sense. And I thought we really need a reality check. So when the party was confronted with the city guards that actually took them to a prison and promised them execution, even though they were in league with the enemy, this felt really real for them, and they really wanted to escape, and they were really desperate. But the one that got taken away did two things. It made the party think of, how are we going to handle our friend, between brackets, that is being taken by our apparent enemy. How are we going to deal with that? And what do we actually feel about what he did by nearly killing this child? And then it tends to go that, because it's a kind of collaborative game, of course, is that they tend to forgive a person for the thing they did, because of the sense of progression of the game, and you want to have all players at the table. But at the same time, you kind of feel that doing the evil thing, even if it's kind of by accident, in the end doesn't really work well for you, because it always stays just beneath the surface and can come out when a new event will happen. Now, this character that was actually kind of, he's chaotic neutral, but he kind of has a tendency to evil. So he knew that what he did was wrong, but it kind of was kind of his behavior as well. And I had a couple of conversations by Horatio with him, so father and son actually, where Horatio would tell him that even though he has these tendencies, he should really be careful of how he expresses himself in the deeds that he does. So, for example, he said, you can do stuff and expand your empire while still being able to confront your friends and doing just things at the same time. But this was kind of a deed that could not go, that was so in the open that you really had to punish it in some way to express the severity of what had happened. And so that is what I did by kind of torturing him. I took a finger from, first of all, he got taken into this white cell. There was some blood on the floor, but there was also this bucket with a mop in it and some water. And there was this man hanging from the ceiling in a kind of contraption that was really painful. And this person was already dead, so that one got taken away, and he got there instead of him. And then the mother got in there and started kind of cutting him at first, and that hurt a lot, but he couldn't move and stuff. And then finally he had some there was this other person that was working there mopping the floor that he got involved in his adventure, but that person got punished for almost aiding him, and he was so kind of mind fucked, so to say, that he kind of told the mother of the child what was happening, so he got punished for that as well. And then he finally lost an eye and 2 fingers, and that was really hard. And in the end, he got taken away by Rosalind, who's kind of a friend of him, who was also in the city, and she kind of took him away from there and dropped him in front of the safe house because she was following the others doing their escape because she hadn't been caught. She was also somewhere involved somewhere. It doesn't really matter for the story. So this was the scene that I did with that character, but then of course this is very hard, and you really have to, you know, it's a party of 7 players that in the end will have to deal with this, and they all have to have their opinion on what he has done and if he has been punished enough. And I think that everybody agreed that he, at some level, he had been punished enough, and he really was really sad about what he did to the kid, and it was kind of a turning point for the character as well, up to a certain degree. But there was this sense of unease afterwards, because now the good guys in the party had this idea of, well, how do we include such a character in our group? And he wasn't the only one that they had doubts about their motivations. So I'm getting to that part later. But so that's why I did a punishment. That's why it was so hard to really let them feel that this world has powerful people in it that punish you for doing things that are wrong in their eyes, even though they are the bad guys. They still have children and stuff. And the child didn't die, by the way. And I'm very glad about that as well, because I wouldn't have liked it. It should have been a complication, but instead it became kind of the focus thing. And I let that play out because, you know, hard emotions are part of life as well. Anyway, so the punishment had been done. I think it did its work, but it also did something else that I had to mend as well afterwards. So the skill challenge. I prepared a map for the guard station where the jail was at, but they kind of ran from the jail, the stairs to the jail, towards one of the nearest windows, and just jumped through the window and all went out as fast as they could. They kind of nearly cut down one of the guards that was in their way, even though they shouted, "Go away, please go away!" And the guard was just like, "No, I'm very cool, and I want to stop these criminals that are escaping from the jail. He was one of the good guys, actually, because not all of them were corrupt in that station. And then I just started to do the skill challenge. So now, what is a skill challenge? The skill challenge is where you decide as a dungeon master how they can shake off, in this case, the guards, while gaining speed and finally losing them, while getting to their destination without getting noticed too much, so to say. So there are a couple of aspects. A skill challenge doesn't take rounds per se. It gets involvement from the players with what they are good at. So I always let the players decide what they are going to do during their run to make them gain or not gain, to leave the guards behind up to the point where the guards will not follow them anymore. And so in this case, I think I had decided to do 5 successes before 3 failures, which means that you have to have 5 successful rolls before you do have 3 failed rolls. So a failed roll is 5 successes. I had 6 players that were running. So if all of them would have been successful, it would be an automatic success. But for example, if you have 4 that make it and 2 that fail, then the next one is decisive in if they are going to make it or not. This is all explained much better, I think, in 4th and 3rd edition than it is in 5th edition. But this is kind of how a skill challenge works. Now, how do you build a skill challenge? So it's always a bit of a strange thing, because it also, most of the times you have kind of an enemy that is kind of competitive with the level of the party. So in this case, it was a lot of guards in a busy city, and I was thinking this is about on their challenge level. And then you kind of decide the difficulty checks that they have to make for the different things that they are going to do. And this is where it gets a bit tricky, because you want to kind of reward your characters for thinking of cool ways to escape the guards that are following them. But then again, you also want to kind of be able to say that, okay, this is kind of a good idea, but it's not really applicable. So I kind of increased the DC somewhat, so that you can still do it, but it's more difficult to do. And that can, as a dungeon master, you can have that perspective on that case, but the player might think that they actually did a great thing coming up with their solution to the problem. So I kind of tend to keep a simple DC, which is a DC for skill checks, and there's a DC for ability checks. The thing I mostly do is that, for example, when I set the skill check to 13, I set the DC of ability checks to 10, because there's no proficiency involved there. It's a bit easier to do. So instead of making them on the same level and making it harder for people who come up with simply pushing something away or whatever, I'm not making it more difficult for them to do the thing. This is for a 4th to 5th level party. So I think I actually made the DCs 13 and 10 for the successes, and of course then for the failure states as well. So with an average +3 bonus, or no, not with an average, with a +3 bonus to your main scores, and players mostly deciding to do the things they are good with, and then with a +5 to maybe a +6 bonus on the skills that they are good at, they need around 7 to be successful. But remember, they have to do 5 successes before 3 failures, and sometimes when they complicate things themselves, or sometimes you see the players wanting to make it difficult for themselves, I do increase the DC by 2 or something. But then I'm telling it and why I'm doing it, because then it makes sense, and they rather have a laugh than cry about it. So what are examples of things they can do? Well, one of them took his, what are those things called? Where you get 1,000 of them. these balls that you can drop on the street, and so people will slip over them. One of them pushed a cart into the middle. One distracted the people by running up a building, monk of course, and getting up on a roof so that they split up for a while. One threw a dagger that totally missed. That's an attack roll, which is at the same kind of a degree. And then they gained on him because he stumbled, for example, and the rest of them kind of waited for him. And so I think it came. They had 2 failures. They might have had 4 successes, and it really came to the last one, and that was a success in the end. But they really had to aid each other when doing it, because they really wanted to have a success. So they really started to think about an amazing thing to do and how they could do this together. And that's the fun thing about the skill challenge. They come up with how they handle the route towards the end. And the only thing that you're saying is, okay, you were successful, you round the corner, you see this slope downstairs, there are all these people there, even though it's kind of early morning, there are all the crates at the side and people crossing over. So what are you going to do? And then one of them will say, well, we push one of the crates to the street or something, and then they start building their own involvement into the scene. And that's what I love about skill challenges. And my players love it as well. They really thought that this was a real cool thing to do. And they said it equals a session full of combat, so to say. Why is this the case? It's because you, as a dungeon master, take this seriously. You really think about what they are going to do. You really want to make it exciting for them, but keep it dangerous as well. I saw this great post on Facebook somewhere, where a dungeon master had said during a session that the monsters had just enough, just the amount of XP of hit points that he needed to make the encounter scary, and this breaks the involvement of your players, because now they understand that no matter what kind of features they use, the monster will only drop when the dungeon master wants the monster to drop. I think this is a very bad way to be a dungeon master. It's okay to tweak the numbers sometimes when you really messed up with the numbers itself, but to punish the players for becoming more powerful and being able to do more stuff by simply adding hit points on the whim is I think is the signs of a very bad dungeon master. Not especially when you mention it. You can do it behind the scenes when you really messed up your hit points and put them up just too low, or you're starting the game and think, oh man, this would have been the main encounter, and now they're going to kill it in one round because I really made a mistake. Then you can multiply the hit points for once, but keep to the score at some point, because if you don't, everything becomes irrelevant that you do. You have to have the scare in there. You don't need to make everything total party kill deadly, TPK, but you do need to start to understand the balance through your Dungeon Master career, where the players have to feel powerful and not feel like they are betrayed when they start using the stuff that they can use. So when I set my DCs, I don't tell my DCs to the players beforehand, but I do consciously set my DCs in my head. And I think I set them to 10 and 13 in this case. And I did say when it was getting more difficult because of the silliness they did, or I said it would be easier. Well, it mostly got easier because they helped each other, so then you have an advantage on the roll. You don't really need to drop the DC. But it got easier when they worked well together, which is in the rules actually. So 10 and 13 were my numbers. If you are being hunted by Efreets in the City of Brass in the elemental plane of fire, and they have flying allies, and you get burnt at every corner, then the Cs will probably be higher, but you'll probably be stronger as well. And I decided on a result of 7 or 8 needed on the die to be successful. You can make harder challenges by making the roll needed like 10 or 11, then you have a 50% chance. You can also say 3 successes before, or 5 successes before 1 failure, which is a far more dangerous state. But you can tweak all these things, but be kind of. I told them when they were nearly there, and I told them that when they. I told them that they needed 5 successes before the 3 fails, just to make it exciting for them as well, and to not be able to come back on my own words as well. So that's what I have to say about a skill challenge escape. And I'm hoping that chat will tell me that if they understood what I was getting at, and possibly if they want to ask a question about what I've just told them. But there's always a delay, so it's a bit awkward for the YouTube video because we do not edit this. We just do it as it comes, and if you like it on YouTube, you like it on YouTube, and hopefully you do. We are the Voidcast, and we try to bring all our experience to the table, and that means that. But we also have daytime jobs. We are so we have to think about how we spend our time. And this is one of the ways, by just really preparing for these kinds of things from our knowledge base, from our experience, and from the things that we've really done, which I think is a very important learning tool. Really doing the thing, that is not playing for a long time. That's just what happens through the years, but drawing from experience, that's a big thing. So no real questions, I think. So now we've done punishment. I've taught you why things are where, and we did the skill challenge escape. That leaves us with let's put the screen up again. That leaves us with how to unite your players and how to run an escape elaborate dungeon style. So there was no map involved in here. You by now know that I really like maps, so I'm going to show you a map quite soon. But let's first set the stage somewhat. They are in this. I had a feeling. A kind of Order of the Phoenix house, very well. It wasn't hidden in that way, but it had a very narrow front, and it expanded to the back. It didn't really have a map for it, but it had this small corridor and this wide rooms with kind of sheets laying over the piano and stuff. That kind of house. Wasn't that monsterly as the Order of the Phoenix house, but it was this claustrophobic high house where they needed to stay for a couple of days and really wasn't that comfortable to stay at. That was the kind of feeling that I wanted them to experience there. And so when they were there for a day and were hiding, then the body of Aaron got dropped in front of the door with his 2 fingers and his eye missing. And they nurtured him back to health over the time of like 4 or 5 days, which is cool as well because they kept standing watch and they saw guards passing the house, but they never really came to the house because they really did the skill challenge pretty well. And then Johanna was there as well, and she helped them cure their friend and talk about them somewhat about what had happened, and now she would investigate what the sentiment was about their escape and stuff, and they discovered they should probably not come back to Dramur for a long while because people were very mad, and they by now didn't have the means to solve their predicament, so they had to escape. And so she told them that there's this shaft that leads down with an iron stair that had been placed in there, and when they would go down very far, they would land on top of this church that was underground, and from there they had to follow the right wall towards the main gate, and after the main gate they would follow the path that would cross the chasm twice, then lower themselves down through a hole in the ground and take the river down towards the end and just sail away. And they had kind of a goal when they would sail away that they would go to Hennessio, which was the hometown of the half-elf in the party. And so they kind of knew what they wanted to do after the escape. So that gave them some idea of what to do there. So well, the first part of this was the city. Yeah. I hope you can see it. Is it the right way around? Yeah. So this is the map that I drew. I like maps, so this is what they would encounter, so to say. Can you see the map clearly? Is it okay like this? I'll put it there, for example. This is where the church was, and I made an encounter out of the church because it's cool to make an encounter out of the church. I put a magical item in there for them to find. I had all these corridors come towards this, this newly created hallway or kind of cavern-like corridors got into the church, which had some hook horrors in them, and I thought, well, hook horrors are really scary, so that would be a cool encounter. But then we have a paladin with frightening presence, and that kind of screws up a whole lot of encounters, so you have to be really careful with paladins in your party. Anyway, it was really cool to see them go down and describing the sense of them going down and what it felt for them to go down and heading into darkness, and the area became colder and stuff, and then they came into this church, and it was a really old church with bodies lying in a certain corner and staircases missing, and they had to fight the hook horrors, which was a cool encounter, even though it was quite easy. But it was actually okay that it was quite easy because there were a lot of other encounters after that one. So they kind of handled it. They knew that they had to get out of the church, go to the right and go to the right again, which is this corridor, which will go there. As you see, I have these blue lines on the map as well. And these blue lines are the sewer system that's underneath the city. So they could also get around the corner here, get into the sewers and find their way under the city streets. But of course what they did is, the first thing they did is when they went out of the church, they cast a daylight spell. Oh, man, players. Don't you love them? Don't you love them? Because daylight spell and a city full of darkness with monsters in it is always fun. And it immediately attracted a Behir, which was kind of scary, and it talked Draconics, but the character also had tongue, so they could have kind of communicated with it. They had redrawn into the church to stay there, and they kind of tried to make a deal in tongues, and the Behir seemed to kind of agree with them, but then players. So they got out of there again. They kind of upset the Behir because of some things that they said, and then the Behir started actually kind of following them, and when he thought the moment was right, started attacking them, and then we went into a second skill challenge actually for that part of the city, and the skill challenge was them running towards the main gate, and this immediately because of this running, they passed the opportunity to really look into this direction, because this is the gate to the big bad evil guy's lair. And they would have seen two stone golems there. There was this ward behind this line that's here. It says Vision Border Wormhole Rage. Wormhole is the sorcerer that made the city, that destroyed the city, and he's got all this vision running around. They actually kind of still heard him talking in their heads, even in this part of the city, which was a kind of cool thing that happened as well. But they had to run this way. But the other thing is that there was a Hydra. A Hydra here and a Bullet. So there were all these kinds of big monsters that were living here in the lower city, and the Hydra had Cobalt followers, and the Hydra's lair was connected, as you can see. This is the Hydra's lair. There was an entrance here, but there was also an entrance in the sewer. So if they would have gone through the sewers, they had to pass through this sewer, through the lair towards the other part of the sewer here. And there were all these kobolds there, and the Hydra wasn't there at that moment. But anyway, they started running here. All these kinds of kobolds came after them. They were making attacks and letting spells fly as part of their skill challenge and stuff. They sometimes hit, and at the same time, this Bullet and this Bear were fighting each other across their heads, and they were leaping over them, and oh man, it was so cool. It was really a scenic thing to do, and I hadn't expected that this would have been the case, but people use a skill challenge sometimes. It's so cool to describe things cinematic and still make it very scary, because at a certain point the two of the characters came into the breath weapons range of the bay here. That still happens, even though you do a lot of it in theater of mind. And they had to get that person up and cure him again, and that delayed their flight, and the kobolds were getting nearer. And you can make attacks and you can deal damage when these skill challenges are happening, and especially when they are so involved with these big creatures that are happening. So it was kind of a running scene with some combat involved and very cool cinematics. And some of them were invisible, and that got them confused as well. Anyway, so they immediately did a right turn, went to the city exit, and there was this shield that the monsters couldn't get through, because that was the same shield that held the undead kind of at bay, but it had been placed by Johanna, and so they could move through because she had really she did that for them. They didn't know that, but they just thought, well, the monsters are being kept there, we are not part of the monster crew, so we can pass through. That's always the fun thing, how players explain the things that you have actually been thinking about in a whole other context. So then they got outside, and I think we kind of ended the session there. And then they had to cross the chasm. And so then, these are the things where you really are doing the dungeons for Dungeons and Dragons. And so the chasm was filled with mist, and there were all these undead standing at the bottom. And then the bridge was really noisy, and when you would make noise, these spectral creatures would come up from the mist and start harassing them. And these spectral creatures had an ability to push. So when enough of them would arrive and they would start fading, they would be pushed in to the mist and fall into the undead army, which happened to the barbarian, but he got out through a miracle. And I actually kind of made a mistake here by making the bridge too long. That's a life lesson that you sometimes get. It got boring once they were at the half point, and so then I kind of, compensated for that by getting them know that they kind of knew what the deal was about the bridge now, and if they moved slowly, they could do the rest of the thing without any more harassing or just a little bit. So that's the kind of challenge I did there. Then they had to pass along the wall, and then they had to cross the other bridge. They had to rest somewhere in between in a hollow, and they had to climb over a chasm, the standard things that are really cool and an adventure stuff. And then when undead are just beneath you, it's really scary as well. And then they went down here where there were a lot of ropers around the hole. So they needed to get into the hole, but there were these ropers that were trying to kill them before that, and so that made for a cool encounter. And then when they finally got down, that's this spot on the map, they got into this harbor area where there was this chest just standing there with a folding boat in it. And the funny thing is, they accepted it as treasure that just was put there, but of course Johanna had put that boat there. They discovered the folding boat, they thought it was really cool, and they kind of sailed away. But at the same time, as I said, there was this conflict in the party. Alwon, the sorcerer who had been tortured was really scared, but the paladin and the cleric had a big problem with him as well. And so up to the point that they really didn't understand how they could cope with evil in their party anymore. And so that's where the next part of the journey became important. That is this map. This line here is the river and how it splits here and how it does things there and how it finally ends here. And it describes where these points are on the map. And the first thing that they encountered, I think, was this kind of sideways landing spot where there was a kind of a cell. And there they discovered a cleric that had been tortured to death, and he was a cleric of Paragon. And in my mind, he would always have been there, but since the cleric and the paladin, who were both of the same belief, were really getting trouble of understanding what their role was in the party, I took that as a moment where I took them aside and let them talk to their god. And this is such a cool thing to do. Oh, why don't you tell him this, man? Okay. So this is the city map, the underground city map. I wasn't looking at chat, sorry. This is the city map. This is where the church is. This is where the sewers are running. This is the way they went. This is where the big bad evil guy was. This is the chasm. This is the bridge across it. And this is where they went down to find the folding boat. And then this is the map with the river, a certain couple of points along the river. And then the kind of... this is the place where the cleric of Paragon had been tortured to death, and they found his armor and stuff. So what I did, I let them talk to their god, and their god is a benevolent god, a really nice guy actually, and he just said, maybe you can't cope with evil, but you can try to understand what they are going through and put them on the right path. So this sounds really easy, and it kind of is, because as a dungeon master you have experiences with crisis of faith in your characters who play clerics over time. Paladin isn't that safe for me anyway, but I didn't want to address that same issue again in this campaign, so they're not all losing their paladinhood just because of one evil act. And that really, what I did is really make it about them for a second. And then the other thing I did, which they kind of thought that they did, and well, they had part of it as well, we decided that they and me at the same time decided that they had to take watch on the boat and really steer it together, and that made it into a kind of cooperative game where they really had to trust each other and put a light spell on the front of the boat and just watch over to see if there were any rocks lying just below the surface and stuff. And that was kind of bonding ritual where they each got the chance to talk. And then outside of the game, I kind of addressed it as well. Of course you can go the route where you are going to address the evil of the party by simply expelling them from your party. But you are also playing a cooperative game, so think of a reason why you should stay together, and you don't really have to force it if you can make it believable as part of your of who you are, and that I think is a very important thing to tell your characters, that you, of course, you can do the extreme thing, but it's so much more cool to not do the extreme thing and actually think of how you are going to help your fellow adventurers. The evil guys might not really want to do that. They might just profit from this, but that doesn't make the game less interesting because of this fact, so to say. And then this, because I did this from the standpoint of their god, they got really motivated by it as well. They got a sense of exclusivity. Yeah, I think it's the right word. When they talk to their gods, and they suddenly had a perspective on their party that they didn't have before that, and they took up with the monk Bochi. They involved him as well, and then you had this kind of these three groups of characters. That is one in the middle, two in the middle, two on one side, and three on the other side. That kind of got together again. And then at the so I actually used this trip to bond them, and this is great things to do on journeys. So I'm, as a dungeon master, I'm very bad at doing really long journeys. For some reason, something happens every day, which is also happening now in our Precipice of Dreams adventure, where I think we haven't had a single day of normality. Maybe the second day in the last town, but so much has gone on before that it's relative. But I think I kind of did it during this journey, even though there was this waterfall that they had to navigate, and there was this body that they found. The rest of it was sailing for a couple of days underground, or at least sailing, going with the stream, not really sailing, of course. And that was a really cool setting. And then finally, at the end, they came to this place, which was kind of a mushroom farm that was maintained by a lizard folk druid of Circle of the Spores. And they got into a trip there, which let them see another part of the story that I'm not going to talk about this session, because I'm going to do that in the next one, I think. Or maybe I will skip that, I don't know yet. And they bonded over mushrooms, so to say, which was pretty funny. And finally, when they woke up from their mushroom rush, they found themselves on the boat again, and they sailed into the morning, leaving the rocks behind. So what have I been telling you? Sometimes you need to punish your players. I think this is true, and you don't have to be. I was really punishing one of my players in a way. I think it was necessary, and of course I am going to reward him again later on because of this, because you don't want to, he's missing fingers, and you don't want to give him disadvantage on every attack roll or stuff. He's missing an eye, so he's missing perspective. He's getting an augury eye, an eye that he can put in his head again, and which once a day he can cast a spell augury to do a wheel or woe thing, which is really nice. It's a fun thing, and he can see through that eye again, and that's cool. And his hands, they haven't regenerated, but he can cast with them normally now, and they are a reminder of what happened. But at the same time, it's a great motivation again to, at a certain point, return to the place where he got his hands turned out, and really do something about that part of his past. So that was kind of his journey. And then the opposite journey also happened, where the good guys were really not understanding anymore what they needed to do. And well, I just described it. Make it a journey, make them bond again, do a bit of explanation out of game that is a cooperative game, and let them know how they can come together again, and make it so. We've discussed about why are things where they are. I'll just rewatch the video to hear me talk about why things were here in the first place. By the way, this last druid, I just liked her being there. There was not really another reason for her being there, but I actually used the mushrooms to do something else with the party, which was pretty cool and tied into the story anyway. But it was just cool that she was there, and the cleric was there to give them some loot during the adventure. The zombies was there to give them the zombie chasm was there because the chasm full of zombies was there because it was cool, and it was this kind of cool undead encounter. The city was there because of the way they could have seen something that was from. I did some foreshadowing there, let's put it that way, but instead they had to run for a long time, and they kind of made a couple of mistakes, which was pretty cool as well. Mistakes are a way to progress a story as well, by the way. And then I actually did 2 skill challenges. One skill challenge as part of this bigger dungeon, which is always a cool thing to do. Do a dungeon at times, don't and make it a real thing. This is a large dungeon. there's underground river in it, so it's really large, and it is actually a city or the front of those kind of molded houses, collapsed houses that make up the corridors of this cool dungeon. There's some tropes, like the chasm full of zombies. That's scary, and monsters running through the street and following you. That's scary as well. And ropers as a type of creature that's really cool with their tentacles that drag you towards their mouths. And give them a folding boat and give them some cool armor and stuff, and really make it happen for them. And on the altar there was an amulet that gave the monk 1 extra key point. He's really dead with that magical item. So think about how you want to handle your escape. And I hope I've elaborated enough. I hope you understand what I'm saying. Not that many questions. I would have liked to answer it, and I would have liked to put my maps up earlier. Sorry for that. Thanks for the replies. And I think that's it for now. So possibly no Talking Void next week, but there will be a parallel projections with probably Dusk City Outlaws, and then the week after that there's the Precipice of Dreams again on Monday. Follow us on all our Insta or on all our socials. Give that follow, give a like, give us everything that you can, because we really like that. And glad to have you here, and see you next time. Goodbye.